No one has ever came along and ever given you sufficient, intelligent knowledge about your beautiful self. How you work from the inside out. Because you have nothing better. You have dreamt of nothing better because no one has ever taught you how to dream better.
A person, a child, that grows into adolescent, teenage, and then adult, everyone has 3 feminine and 3 masculine elements.
The third element
Of spiritual life. We're born in oneness with this uniqueness of self, but the life source that these 6 elements are, the 7th being, the self of the human will, who child is naturally aligned with in its heart's thought process of thinking. Do you understand?
is the power of transformation. It is the end result for the alchemist.
Stay with me. The first 3 elements are the birth of spiritual life inside the child. And get your religious dogma out of here for a second. Just listening and follow carefully, because it's important for you to know if you're a parent and if you want to learn how to communicate with child and grow that child into the productive adult that your heart's thought sees from the goodness of the well-being of your child. You see? Okay, so the 3 feminine elements of human spirit are that which births knowledge of the living, emotionally impacted self, and that uniqueness. And the uniqueness is learned in childhood through the first element, which is truth. Truth is fed to us all. Let's just say there's a spiritual seed that feeds us this.
Brain is capable of millions of neural nets.
Biochemical and emotional response.
Feeds us the knowledge of truth. And with a knowledge of truth learned in new human experience, as we grow through and learn through experiences, we have an emotional impact to experiences, knowing, and what we know in the experience is the experience, the truth of the experience. After we understand it logically, after thought has been impregnated by this feminine element, with the knowledge of truth from the experience, and then the emotional impact comes. The emotional impact is used as a guide to understanding first uniqueness and then the self-expression of that uniqueness. We see this in our children now before they're turned into the teenager show theory, and we call that innocence. We're very deeply moved by that, and knowing how the child works spiritually is knowing the spiritual mechanics of spirit, how they work. Okay, there's a ton of information to know, but this is the beginning, and the beginning of life in people. Okay, so truth in its emotional response gives a person knowing, a conscious awareness. Consciousness, that truth also provides thought and thought process. First thought is the first thought awareness in our experiences. As you're sitting here listening to me, it's a new experience for you. As I speak words, you're logically absorbing that and trying to understand them. That's a new experience. And because we're emotional creatures, we have emotional responses to those things. And if you're feeling those right now, then that's what I mean, but you're soon to feel them. And you felt them. You felt their emotional response, so you know what I'm talking about. That's the first element, feminine element of the spiritual life inside the child. The second one is once thought has become impregnated with the knowledge of truth through the experience, and then the emotional impact to help self-discover self and uniqueness of self. From this life source that truth is to us, wisdom, the wisdom of truth and emotional response. That's another feminine element because it births knowledge of the experience. So we go through our experiences and we accumulate a knowledge base of our experiences. Knowledge base is fed to us from the knowledge of truth, fed to us from the life source, fed to us from whatever feeds the life source. You decide what that is in your heart's thought, because it's unique to the individual.
The third element.
After wisdom sees the knowledge base of truth that we have, that helps us understand to the point that we understand now, and more to learn, and we learn through the awareness of truth. So that's provided for. Life is provided for through truth. Wisdom of the two. Knowledge and the emotional response. The emotional response is its own knowledge base. It is the heart's thought. The heart's thought has wisdom and a thought process. It connects with our masculine elements in thought. Anyway, wisdom explains a definition of the accumulation of the knowledge that we've experienced, you see? And it develops things like empathy. And we can act through empathy in other people, feel loved by the actions of goodness. And what that takes is a person to calculate thought with intellect's feminine element is wisdom. Okay, so truth and logic is one element that brings life of that understanding. Truth in its understanding. Intellect and wisdom brings us to a light and logic, a greater light and logic that defines the first thought's understanding of our human truth. Do you see?
It's basically this notion that if we take two substances, we can make a third substance out of this.
So through intellect and wisdom, the lower levels of truth and logic that provide the information, we are led there.
Three as such is always the power of transformation. It is the end result for the alchemist, basically saying, I took certain things and I created something new.
Through intellect and wisdom, as long as we keep calculating thought, heart's thought, with the wisdom of good,
the third element,
instead of the rejecting one, because rejection of human emotion, truthful human emotion in a child, is seeking, a child speaks and seeks knowledge. That's the joy and the innocence part, when a child feels acknowledged. But when we reject them on purpose or not, and a lot of it's not on purpose, we think we're doing the right thing, but what we're doing is really killing off the spiritual life inside the child. It happened to each one of us, and each one of us know what that means. Well, now there's a map in understanding how that works. So now you don't have to. You have to develop yourself into a balanced, determined self in order to be the acknowledgement model of parenting.
The third element.
For which every child needs to maintain itself through into adult land without becoming reckless and self-destructive and a drain on community instead of a contributor. We are not bad people. We're not evil. There's an element, you know how life I just described, and you get that? An elemental, dark source of spiritual influence inside each of us because it's invited through the rejection model of parenting. Its dangers are the result of what we see in the world today. Each generation of human being used to think in terms of life. Now we think in terms of spiritual death of that life, the innermost truth of the self, because we fear so terribly the humiliation, the stem result emotions of negative feeling that are left unresolved, that connect with early childhood feelings of humiliation, embarrassment, and ridicule. When we think we're going to feel that, we shut down, we don't express, and in that way we're in prison. The child becomes imprisoned inside his fear. Fear has, and those are the dark elements of the dark spiritual nature of people. It's fear. Fear has one emotion. It's fear of what, though? Fear of the emotional truth of the self. There's nothing to fear except for that first. And when we obey that fear, we say nothing. And in that, and when we don't work through our emotional selves as part of our life source, then we get all jammed up. The electromagnetic pulse in our hearts does no longer align with the Earth's magnetic pulse, in which thought and heart's thought, you see, connect and produce the same pulse. Ask your scientist. But when we don't self-express like a child does naturally, which we're supposed to maintain throughout our lives, but don't. It's because of the rejection model of parenting. If you're going to reject child, you're creating a monster of duality and spiritual nature, of fearing loss in thought of self-expression. The extreme of that is Hitler's in the world, is at the other end of that. Homeless people, junkies, mental illness that's allowed to rot out like this. The final masculine element is the human will of the self, the uniqueness of that self, that truth, emotion, and wisdom and intellect tell self that self is.
Always the power of transformation. It is the end result for the alchemist.
So the first four elements, masculine and feminine elements in human self that birth life, in which we are naturally inclined to rebirth life from that life.
The third element.
In childhood, are turned by the dark spiritual nature of fearing loss. Truth, movement, gut feeling, intuition. We've been calling, I don't remember anybody ever calling it a life source, but it is. That's what it is. It births knowledge of
the third element.
That if they can understand God's anatomy, they can learn how his powers work. These ancient drawings reveal that God's body is similar to humans. The top symbolizes God's head, which is the source of will, wisdom, and understanding. Below that are symmetrically arranged organs and limbs, representing love, power, beauty, eternity, and splendor. The most unusual part of the diagram contains sensual imagery. The ninth part of God, called the foundation, is the phallus, or procreative life force of the universe. But according to the Sephiroth, God also has female components. The final element, often called Shekinah, was depicted as the feminine half of God. This image challenged the age-old view of a strictly masculine God.
Who are we? Where do we come from? What should we do? And where are we going?
Why are we here? Well, that is the ultimate question, isn't it?
To bring about in the human mind the radical revolution. The crisis is a crisis in consciousness.
What I mean is that we move out of the area of the brain that has to do with our personality, that has to do with our association to people, our association to places, our association to things and times and events. We don't exist in the associative centers in our brain that reaffirms our identity and reaffirms our personality.
That's why very few people make this journey, because it's deeply unsettling. All of the molds that we have lived by have to be broken, and we have to liberate ourselves in this way. And sometimes there's an awkward period between the comfort that we knew before and the real state of comfort when we are the Lord of our being, which follows that interval of chaos. Most people, when they get into the chaos, give up hope and go back to the old, false securities.
Man, he's still as he was. He's still brutal, violent, aggressive, acquisitive, competitive, and he has built a society along these lines, a crisis that cannot anymore accept the old norms.
I had the game wrong. The game was to find out what I already was.
What we find for the first time is that this feminine aspect, the feminine consort of God, is divine and is part of the divinity.
So to unite the male and female halves of God, this becomes the goal of the whole system. It describes that union in very graphic terms. There really is a romance within God. One brings together these two halves of God. You might say that this is how we actualize the divine potential in the world.
thing I've learned in the last 7 years. In every game and con, there is always an opponent. There is always a victim.
We both know what you are, don't we? You're a man who needs a master.
The trick is to know when you're the latter, so you can become the former.
Allows us to see things that we would not normally see.
Over the past 18 years, our research center has investigated heart-brain interactions, how the heart and the brain communicate with each other, and how that affects consciousness and our perceptions. One of the things we identified in our research was the state we now call coherence. And what we found was that when we're feeling positive emotions, like we're really appreciating the sunset, or really feeling love or compassion or care for someone, that the heart beats out a very different message. The heart generates by far the largest rhythmic electromagnetic field produced in the body. And what we've now found is that if we look at the spectrum analysis of the magnetic field radiated by the heart, that emotional information is actually encoded and modulating into those fields. So by learning to shift our emotions, that's changing the information we're encoding into the magnetic fields radiated by the heart, and that can impact those around us. We are fundamentally and deeply interconnected with each other and the planet itself, and what we do individually really does count and matter.
In a nutshell, scientists have discovered that the heart does much more than just pump blood throughout the body. The human heart emits an electromagnetic field that surrounds the entire body and extends at least 15 feet in every direction. This field sends signals to every cell in your body, affecting physical, mental, and emotional health and well-being. The heart field also interacts with and is affected by the electromagnetic field of the earth, as well as other people, plants, animals, anything that has electromagnetic qualities, which includes pretty much everything, including space, planets, even stars. Exactly how and to what degree our individual heart fields are affected by the environment is still under investigation. However, it is clear beyond any doubt that this field connects all of us to each other, to the earth, and to space in ways that we don't yet fully understand. We do know that humans that intentionally create heart coherence in their own field have a positive impact upon their own health and well-being. Creating heart coherence also has a positive impact upon those around us. The extent to which creating individual coherence can have an impact on global coherence is being tested right now by the Institute of Heart Math. The electromagnetic human heart field is a powerful source of energy and information that literally tells all the cells in your body what to do. It exists within and is a part of a universal ocean of electromagnetic energy and information which can be accessed by the human mind when it connects to the heart. The information that can be accessed by the mind through the heart is what we call heart intelligence. It includes and transcends the information we gain through 5 physical senses, adding a new dimension to human intelligence that expands human consciousness and empowers the mind. To learn more about heart intelligence, to access tools and resources for creating heart coherence, and to connect your own mind and heart, visit metaphysicsforlife.com.
What I began to understand was that this is the great secret that everyone knows except us in the West. Almost any other culture that we go to, from the monasteries in Egypt and Tibet and India and Bolivia and Peru, the indigenous traditions, little villages in the Andes Mountains, they all know that there is this experience that we can have inside of our bodies that affects our world in some way, and our science simply has not allowed for that historically. So it was in going into the monasteries and the nunneries and speaking with the indigenous people, looking at them eye to eye, heart to heart, God to God, and I could say to these people, when you just performed that miracle, when you just performed that miraculous healing, what is it that you did inside of your body to make that happen? And if I didn't understand what they told me, I'd ask them again and again and again through the translators until I understood that they were creating and experience producing an effect inside of their bodies that my science never told me was possible or existed. And that was the path that led me. I just want to emphasize, science is good. And I believe our science is good and served us well. It simply is incomplete. And so it was that path that allowed me to flesh out the missing pieces that we're only beginning to understand today, marrying the best science of our time with the wisdom, 5,000 years of wisdom of our past. Our hearts are the strongest magnetic field in our bodies, and our hearts are the strongest electrical field in our bodies, much more so than the brain. While the brain does create those kinds of fields, the heart is many times stronger. And what the science now is showing is that when you can change the field that the atom is in, you change the atom. And we're made of those atoms. So when we have feelings in our hearts, we're changing the field that connects the stuff everything is made of, and we literally are altering our physical reality in ways that sound miraculous in Western science. But again, this is the great secret everyone knows except us, because Western science has only arrived at this understanding. You go to these ancient and indigenous traditions and cultures, it's where they begin. They begin with the understanding, sure, everything's connected, and sure, we're part of it. And then they take us one step further, and they say, here, I'll show you. I'll show you how to create the effects in your body so that you can heal your body, and you can heal the bodies of others. You can change your self-esteem, and your body will mirror that change. It doesn't have to be a long, slow, drawn-out process. It can happen very, very quickly. Scientifically, it appears that this field, the divine matrix, it is a mirror and a bridge between our inner and our outer worlds. And it can only give us what we give it to work with. And the interesting thing is that we have been conditioned to feel the feelings of the things that we don't want in life and that we're afraid of. We wake up in the morning and we see the 6 o'clock news and all the things to be afraid of, and then we go through our day saying, oh, I hope I'm not going to see that today, or I hope it's not around the corner. And my question so fascinated me, where do we learn to feel the things that we don't want rather than things that we choose to have? And how would our lives be different if we could cut through all of the static and simply choose in our lives what we would like each moment of each day, or our relationships, or our abundance, or our careers, or the peace in our families to look like? What would our lives look like if we could do that? And there's very good scientific evidence showing precisely what our lives would look like, because we would very quickly experience everything that we've created. Because we can have the same thought or the same affirmation and imbue it with a different emotion and have completely different feelings and create a different outcome. And this is the great secret that was edited out of our Christian and pre-Christian, Judeo-Christian traditions. When 45 books were removed in the 4th century, 20 were taken out completely. Another 25 were condensed and rearranged. And we know this because we found the information now in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi Library, the Coptic dynastic texts. I think everyone senses or suspects that there is an untapped potential in the human body. I've been on every continent of the earth, and I've asked every audience I've ever been in, do you feel that that's there? And they say, yes, we feel there's something there, but we just can't quite get it. Why is that? So we have a feeling that there's more to us, but we rely on a written validation in a 5,000-year-old text or a scientific study to tell us that it's true. And this is, I think, the value of going into those texts, is we get to see the words that literally say, in the Gospel of Thomas, the lost Gospel of Thomas, it literally says, when these two become one, when thought and emotion become one, then you'll say to the mountain, move, and the mountain will move. When we see our prayers on the outside, I said, what are you doing on the inside? And this was the man that looked at me. He said, you've never seen our prayers, because a prayer cannot be seen. He said, what you see are the things we do to create the feeling in our body, and the feeling is the prayer, and the feeling is the prayer. And then he turned the question on me, and he said, how do you do this in your culture? Through a translator. And I began to think about this and realize that when we lost the words in our most cherished spiritual traditions that tell us that feeling is a language that speaks to our bodies in this world. And we lost the words that validated that. We began to think that the words themselves were the prayers, and if we say, or the affirmations, and if we say those words the right number of times, the right time of day or the right time of year, that we've said our prayer or our affirmation, and then if it doesn't work, we get frustrated and we say, well, my prayer didn't work, or my affirmation's not working for me, because we lost the link with feeling and emotion.